you can't get the optimized deliverability out of any other tool I've ever worked with or seen that you can get with HighLevel, simply because you've opened up some configuration options that other tools just don't open up.
Hi everyone, welcome to another episode of the HighLevel Spotlight Sessions, where we showcase awesome marketers doing awesome marketing. Today, we are joined by a repeat guest, Krystin Ruschman of Dadgum Marketing, to talk about email deliverability. Krystin, thanks for coming back on.
Thanks for having me on. What a pleasure. This is going to be fun.
So it's very timely to have you back. I feel like I've been seeing a lot of myths out there about email deliverability that need busting. And so rather than exactly, rather than hear it from us all the time, let's hear it from an email deliverability expert. The first thing I want to talk about is the myth of HighLevel versus insert other email marketing platform, Mailgun, ActiveCampaign, whatever. I see this all the time. Oh, I heard that HighLevel stinks when it comes to email deliverability compared to something.
Right. Fill in the blank.
What's the truth of this?
This one, I hear it too, right? Because I'm talking with people about email all day, every day. So, even my clients will sometimes get on the calls and talk about how they think that email deliverability is, suffering somehow because they are trying to move everything into HighLevel. And here's the thing. One of my favorite things to do is to ask them to pull up whatever tool they're currently using. ActiveCampaign, Constant Contact, Zoho, Kartra, I don't care what it is. Just put the tool on the screen. Let's go through and take a look at some stuff. So we look at some stats, which is always an eye-opening experience for people. Number one, because they often don't have the stats that they really need to know whether it's working or not. And so that's kind of a shocker. And then sometimes we'll run some tests and I can show them, like with objective data, not just an opinion, really what's happening or not happening in their current system. And then I'm able to show them some stats maybe from my system or from some of my clients that are okay with me sharing that kind of stuff, where they can see a dramatic difference. It is not the tool. I mean, I can tell you it is not the tool. And actually, I'm going to have to change the way that I answer that question now, because I might actually have to say it is the tool, because what you just showed me this morning with some of the stats that are coming in HighLevel, I am giddy about it. I work with maybe half of those stats usually, and I can get awesome results for people. If you're going to give me more stats, I can only imagine what's going to happen. The HighLevel is it's hands down better than any other tool I've ever used or ever seen any of my clients use. And I can show that with objective data when I talk to people. There's just no comparison. I'm sorry.
Well, that's great to hear.
It's not a commercial, like it really is.
Exactly. Yeah. And let's flesh out a little bit why. So when you sign up with some other tool, right, whatever one, you have no control over this kind of stuff, right? It's all behind the scenes of that company, right? And so we're the opposite approach, because we don't sell to direct businesses. We only sell to marketers, marketing agencies. We believe you should have the most control possible, which is why we tell you to get your own SMTP provider and plug it in. We usually recommend Mailgun, and now you see things like, oh, well, Sendinblue is so much better than Mailgun for deliverability. And I feel like that's another myth that I'm sure we could bust. But the point being, let's talk about that. But I think the point I wanted to make first was that with HighLevel, you have a potential advantage over any other email platform because you have full control over your SMTP provider.
Let me just elaborate that on. I'll try not to get too technical, but any tool, HighLevel, ActiveCampaign, Kartra, Constant Contact, whatever you want to use, any tool is going to set you up with what I always call a baseline setup, like a foundational setup for email deliverability. And it's not even really deliverability, it's just email. Like they're just setting you up with foundational email functionality, okay? And a couple of tools that are out there will let you up the game a little bit. Like they'll let you check a box and say you want to do something a different way than what their baseline setup is. The difference between those tools and HighLevel, the biggest difference from an email perspective, is that you guys have opened up so much more in terms of the bells and whistles that I can configure, that I can turn on, turn off, use at my leisure in the way that I want to. And, that's maybe like a detriment to your help desk team, because there's so much more you can do with your platform than you can do with any other platform, that now it becomes like it breeds a lot of questions and a lot of, people are saying, well, I don't understand how to use this tool. Great. get the learning. There's a lot of tools out there we have to figure out. But my point is, you can't get the optimized deliverability out of any other tool I've ever worked with or seen that you can get with HighLevel, simply because you've opened up some configuration options that other tools just don't open up. So right. That's a huge difference.
So you brought up a good point that I do want to put out there. Krystin is actually, we're working with her to go through our help docs and clean up a lot of things and actually make them more robust. So the help docs are going to get even better around email deliverability. It's certainly a big topic, much bigger than I'm by no means an expert, and we've had many conversations about things in the past. So let's try to flesh out a little bit of that. So first up, Mailgun versus enter any other SMTP provider. What is your take on that?
So here's what I tell people. If we're just comparing Mailgun to SendGrid to Sendinblue to whatever, if we're just comparing straight across SMTP options, there's not a lot of differences. There's going to be some pricing differences. There's going to be some dashboard differences. There's going to be some differences in how well they respond to tickets or how effective they are at answering questions, you know, the support portion of this whole thing. So if we're just talking about that, it doesn't much matter. But when you're talking about using one of those with HighLevel, now we're talking about something entirely different, because me and most of my clients, we use Mailgun, and that's not because Mailgun is better than one of those other SMTPs necessarily. I mean, I came kicking and screaming to Mailgun myself when I first started using HighLevel, and that was the only option. I was like, why, you know? But what I have found, and what you guys are doing a fantastic job of, is when you start pulling out all the stops with the API integration, you start connecting the dots between HighLevel and an SMTP of choice, which is Mailgun in this case. All of a sudden that opens up a whole new world of options, configuration options inside of HighLevel that you just don't get with any of the other options. So if we're talking about that, you know, my first priority is always going to be support. When I'm looking at a tool and I have a choice, the first priority I always look at is support, especially since this is what I do for a living. So I'm not just dealing with the SMTP provider for my own stuff. I'm doing it on behalf of a lot of my clients. I have multiple Mailgun accounts that I log into regularly and look at stuff, and I have to work with Mailgun support on stuff. So that's important to me. But beyond that, I get extra bells and whistles in HighLevel if I'm using Mailgun. I get email validation options galore. I get certain triggers that only work with Mailgun. I get you know, email level, not just campaign level, but email level stats right within Mailgun that I just don't get with any other SMTP option. And I sure as heck don't get that kind of information outside of HighLevel if I'm using a different tool, not to that level. So for me, Mailgun's the obvious choice. I don't make that decision for people. I just help them understand what they can use or not use if they choose a different SMTP. So then they kind of look at the situation and I say, hey, if these things are important to you, then Mailgun's the obvious choice.
Yeah.
It just makes sense.
And that's why we always recommend Mailgun, not because we think that they're so much better than any other platform. It's just that they give us the most information back through their API. And so that was the decision that we made, so that we can surface that information within the app. And we're going to do a lot more of that really soon, especially with the new workflow builder that's going to drop very shortly. So Krystin, I don't want to get really into the weeds technically, but I do want to run through a quick basic checklist, right? If you're having deliverability options, right? You sent a blast, you go look and you're like, what the heck? These numbers do not look good to me. Off the top of your head, let's rattle off some basic things that you would check. I mean, we don't have to go deep into what each one is, but I do want to give people an idea of what they should be thinking about. And then let's talk about symptoms of a bigger problem. Okay.
So there's some basic stuff. I see this a lot on calls. When I get on calls with people, you know, I basically say, I'll answer whatever questions you have, and we'll just take a look at your setup and see if we can find any of those sort of easy fix type things, because I'm perfectly happy getting on a call with somebody and looking at a few things and saying, oh, you need to turn this on. Oh, you haven't set that up. Oh, you're on, you know, the wrong level of plan for what it is you're trying to do. So I start with agency settings. So you go to your agency view in HighLevel. You look at the Mailgun tab, because some people are using Mailgun. Some people don't even realize they're using Mailgun, which is kind of a crack up. But you look at the Mailgun tab, you see for the locations that you're worried about, is there actually an API key and a domain configured, right? Is there an API key and a domain configured? Now I realize this sounds like very simple. Like, why would I need to look at that? You'd be surprised how many people don't have that for every one of their locations, and they don't realize that it's not even using Mailgun for a certain location because they just don't have the information put in correctly. So that's number one. Number two, I go to the SMTP service tab in the same agency settings, and I look to see if they have a different default provider selected besides Mailgun. And then I ask them, which provider are you trying to use? Are you trying to use Mailgun? Are you trying to use, Sun and Blue? Are you trying to use whatever? And often what they say does not match how they've configured the high-level settings. And so that's just an easy conversation to have, so I can help them kind of get that corrected. Now, there's a hierarchy in HighLevel in terms of how it decides for each location which SMTP it's going to use. And so I look at the hierarchy as well. I look to see if they have that location defaulted in, or the SMTP defaulted in the location. I look to see what their agency, Mailgun settings are, and their high-level default Mailgun account. So I look at all of those things because listen, I've done software implementation for 12 years. So I'm trying not to get too nerdy, but software is a lot of questions begging for answers, and it looks in more than one place often to find the answer to the question. And so you have to understand the hierarchy of how any software works to be able to take full advantage of it. So I kind of walk through that with people. Location settings, then we go into a location. Okay, show me which location you want to look at. Which client is complaining? Which client pays you the most money that you'd be afraid to lose? Like, which one is sending the most email? Let's go into that location and let's take a look. And I take a look at like the SMTP and Mailgun settings. And I see, again, do they have the default provider selected? Are they using the BCC address, the forwarding address? Do they even know what those things do? Half the time they've got them filled in, they don't even know what they do, right? So we need to understand how that's gonna, there's pros and cons to using those fields. So how is that gonna affect things, and then make an educated decision? The forward to assigned user, same thing. And then, because if you're using some of those fields, what you might not realize is that you might be forwarding or sending email outside of HighLevel. Like if somebody replies to it, it might go to an outside account. And if your client replies to it from outside of HighLevel, it breaks that reply route. So now it doesn't show up in HighLevel anymore. And there are marketers that I've talked to regularly who don't realize why replies aren't coming into HighLevel. Like they're wondering, where did the conversation go? That my client is saying this is happening, but I'm not seeing it, right? So little things like that. And then we look at the marketing, like we go into a campaign. Let's go into the campaign configuration and see, because again, there's hierarchy. The system is trying to decide with every campaign that has an email in it, who the from name for the email should be and what the from address for the emails should be. And that's an important setting that you need to control. But a lot of people don't fill that in the campaign config. And there's good reason for some, it's not appropriate to put it there. But that is the first place that HighLevel is going to look for the answer to that question. Who should this email go out from, right? And so if you don't have it in the campaign config, the next place it looks to is a user assignment. If there's a user assigned in the campaign, that will actually overwrite any user assignment that's done at the contact level. So understanding the hierarchy of how this system is going to decide who this email is going to go out from is really, really important. And of course, if there's no user assigned, then it looks to company settings. And you don't even want to know what happens if you have company settings that don't have an email address in it, and that's where the system is looking. So all of
that, I feel like that was a great nugget that you when we were talking yesterday, is if you didn't fill out the settings in the campaign configuration and it's defaulting to a user, and that user's account is a Gmail, now it's sending from a Gmail, right. And that's like guaranteed spam.
Right. So, I mean, because a lot of users, if you go to the team management settings under your location or your sub account, and you just look at the email addresses, just run your eyes down them for all the team members. Often they are not email addresses that are going to work well for sending. Like if it's a gmail.com or a yahoo.com, something like that. Do you really want your campaigns going out from that? That's not even your company necessarily. So these are things to be thinking about. And a lot of times, like I said, it's just little stuff. It's understanding the hierarchy of how HighLevel is looking for an answer to the question, where it looks first. And if it doesn't find the value, where does it look next, and so forth, right?
Mm-hmm. All right. So now outside of HighLevel, Mailgun generates 5 DNS records that you need to go set.
Right.
It's a very good idea to set those up, correct?
Well, you can't use Mailgun without them. So yeah.
And now beyond them, there's another one that might be a good idea to set up, right? And I can never remember if it's DKIM, D whatever. What is the one that
DMARC.
Mailgun? DMARC.
Yeah,
okay.
it's DMARC. Listen, again, it's a bunch of technical mumbo jumbo, right? So like Mailgun will spit out 5 DNS records that you need. There's a text record called an SPF, which is basically just like an insurance policy on your domain that says that Mailgun's licensed to drive email on behalf of that subdomain. That's all it is, right? You're just saying Mailgun's allowed to send email for me for the subdomain. And then the DKIM record is basically just like an encrypted code. There's a piece of it in the header of the email that goes out, and there's a piece of it in your DNS settings, so that when you show up to the door, like if you showed up at my door right now and you said, "Hi, my name's Chase and I'm from HighLevel," but you had a name tag on that said your name was Tim and you were from some other company, just imagine, like, I'm probably not going to feel warm and fuzzy about opening the door if I don't know who you are, because you're not who you say you are, or at least that's the way it appears to be. So that's what the DKIM record is really trying to address, is to make sure that you are matching the header of your email with your DNS settings so that it's legit. It's really coming from you, that you are who you say you are. And then they give you a couple of MX records, which is really just the servers that are doing the sending. And they give you a CNAME record. And the whole purpose of the CNAME record is really just to give you all the tracking benefits that you want, right? And I've talked with so many people that don't even know how to find their stats, much less know how to look at them and make decisions based on them. But that's the purpose of the CNAME record, is to give you the tracking options, which is huge from a marketing perspective. But the one you were talking about, the one that they don't spit out because they can't, there's a liability issue with that, is the DMARC record. And the DMARC record is kind of like a second layer of protection. I always tell this funny story about how when I was young, dumb, and stupid, I joke now that I'm not young anymore, but I was young, dumb, and stupid. And I think I was like 17, 18 years old. My friend somehow got us fake IDs. Don't ask me how. Mm-hmm. And we were doing dumb stuff and going to bars and having a good old time. And we went into this one bar that was kind of like a new one for us. And they started looking at the driver's license and asking us the questions and doing the thing they're supposed to do. So they're bouncing off the SPF record and the DKIM record, basically, and they're trying to decide, are we who we say we are? Are we legit? And the bouncer finally decided that he was going to let us through, and he kind of motioned us on by, and we were like, yes, score. And then this other dude, a really big dude, comes over, and we're just going to call him DMARC, okay? But he came over and he's like, wait, hold on, let me take a look at that. And I was shaking in my boots, you guys. I thought for sure I was going to jail. I didn't know. I was 17. So he started doing the same thing. He bounced off the SPF record, bounced off the DKIM record, so to speak, looked at our license, asked us a bunch of key questions. I'm sure he knows, all the questions asked. We were fumbling all over ourselves. And he finally just decided that we weren't who we said we were. And he made a different decision. And that's what DMARC is for. It's to protect, it's a second level of protection, to protect the bar, protect the email provider from letting someone through who's not legit, right? So they held on to our driver's licenses, and not ours, but the ones we had, and said we could come back with some other ID to prove it was us later, which of course we didn't have that either. But it was a good experience. It was a good life lesson for me. But that's kind of how DMARC works, right? When you put a DMARC record in, go ahead.
I was going to say, I think that illustrates the point that DMARC is clearly powerful. But like you mentioned, Mailgun doesn't give it to you because there could be a liability issue there. The DMARC is something that I feel like a lot of people try to do on their own and end up really shooting themselves in the foot. And so I just wanted to point out that there is this technical thing that's sort of next level that could have some next level benefits, but you really want to work with a specialist if you're going to go to that level.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of people that I work with, DMARC record may be entered on their DNS, but it's just entered incorrectly. It's actually maybe missing a character or an element that's required, or it's just not put in well. It's not actually doing what they think it's doing, or what it should do. They don't even know what it does. Frankly, sometimes they're just copying it off of, I don't know, a Google search or something like that and throwing it in there and hoping that that's going to work. But it can actually cause problems. It can break all of your other email setup that's on your domain. So like maybe you have a G Suite account and you have Mailgun set up for HighLevel, right? Well, if you put in the DMARC record wrong, or you put in an extra one so that there's two and now they're conflicting, those kinds of things, then you can actually break your other email without even realizing it. And that's why Mailgun can't give you a DMARC record. They can only give you the stuff that they can control, right? Mm-hmm. So I see that kind of stuff all the time.
All right, so now let's talk about the last thing I want to talk about while we have you is beyond the technical, right? So let's say, you're having a problem, you work with support, they go through your HighLevel side setup, they make sure that your MX records and all of the DNS records are set up correctly, but things still aren't looking good. And we talked about this is sort of symptoms of a bigger problem, right? You can have problems outside of your technical setup that can cause deliverability issues. Yeah. What are these types of things that you've seen?
So, and this is exactly what I do. If you and I were on a call right now, I would have you pull up some stats. You might, hopefully you know where they're at, right? But sometimes we have to kind of figure out where they're at. We start looking at stats. One of the first things I like to look at is the delivered rate or delivery rate. It's called delivered. It's not deliverability, right? Deliverability means I made it to the inbox. Delivered just means I made it to the account. So the opposite of delivered is undelivered, which means if your delivered rate is, 86%, then that means 14% of the email you're trying to send isn't even getting delivered at all. It's like the postman didn't even make it to the mailbox, right? So that's a number that I look at first, because a lot of people don't realize I sent out 1,000 emails, 850 of them actually got delivered, and now I have some stats on whether they were opened or clicked or whatever. But that means like 150 of your emails that you tried to send didn't even get delivered. That's indicative of multiple problems. That's not just one simple little thing. That's not a technical configuration inside of HighLevel. That's usually multiple issues that are being reflected in that value. So I look for a delivery rate of at least 97%, at least. If it's even 96.5, like I can usually find several issues. I can often find issues if it's 97 or 98% even, just looking at other stats. So.
And when you do that, you're going into Mailgun, right? You're looking at the logs. They tell a story. They'll give you error codes.
Yeah. I'm looking at Mailgun, and there's different levels of stats. There's like the dashboard stats, which I don't really find all that helpful because it's for like the entire account. I have to dig deeper, get domain level stats, and then in HighLevel we can get campaign level or email level stats. And so all of those stats tell us a part of the story. You kind of have to be able to put it all together to understand what's really happening, what the root causes of some issues are, or at least what you need to dig into further. But yeah, I'm looking in both, Mailgun or whatever system if they're using Sendinblue or whatever, I'm using whatever they're using for the SMTP. I'm looking at those stats and I'm comparing it with some stuff that I'm also seeing inside of HighLevel.
Now let's talk about the part that nobody wants to hear. And I feel like, I always say when I'm talking to people who are really frustrated about their deliverability, hey, you also need to take a step back and look at the conflicting goals here, right? My email inbox, the goal I have for Google is to, hey, keep spam out of here. And a marketer is almost the polar opposite, right? I want to get things in there that you probably wouldn't say yes to if I just asked you, do you want it?
Not everybody, right? Yeah.
So right off the bat, there's this conflict that you're up against. So to think that you can just send whatever you want and it deserves to go into everybody's inbox is kind of crazy. And so talk to me a little about that. When you look at things and you're like, okay, your emails are being delivered, but your deliverability rate is not good. Right. What kind of conversations are you going to have at that point?
There's so much I could say about that. There's hundreds of things that play into deliverability, right? And usually when I'm working with somebody, I work with them over the course of, a few months, because it's one thing to get to the inbox initially, and we can work on that pretty quickly. It's another thing to stay there and turn it into, positive engagement that leads to ultimately to revenue, right? For you or for your client. So there's a whole bunch of stuff we have to look at. Once you get into the inbox, if you want to stay there, then it becomes a positive engagement issue for the most part. Now we need to talk about what's happening with the rest of your stats. Like, what are your open rates? I have a client, I was just working with this client on Friday, and they had open rate of 41%, which isn't bad. 16 to 26% is average across all industries. I always tell my clients average results are for average people doing average things. So I want to see double that initially, and then we're going to work from there. But this was a 41% open rate, nothing to sneeze at, right? 1% reply. 1% reply. Okay, average replies are like 15 to 25% if you're doing this right. So that tells a story. That's not a deliverability issue, or it will become one because of the engagement, but it's not a deliverability issue on the outset. It's more of I opened your email and I didn't like what I saw. It didn't resonate with me. I didn't feel like it was valuable. It wasn't interesting. It wasn't funny, whatever it is. There's a lot of stuff that we need to work on kind of in the middle. So that's where the stats become really exciting, because they tell the story and they help guide us on, you know, each of those things that happen along that line of, I sent out an email all the way through to I got a paying client out of it. There's a lot of stopping points in there that you kind of have to look at. And in between a couple of stopping points is usually where you can pinpoint an issue. But the stats are, you know, how we figure that out.
You brought up a great point of like, one of the hundreds of things that they determine is like text to image ratio, right? And you'll talk to people that are like, well, I don't get it. The HighLevel weekly roundup is full of images, but that, you know, makes it to my inbox. And you brought up a great point. Yeah, but you want that email, right? Think of how many thousands of people want that email because they need to see what's inside. So everybody's opening it, everybody's engaging with it. It gives you more leeway to break some of the sort of standard rules, right?
I hear this all the time. People are like, I can't even tell you how many clients are like, they're all excited about the email builder and the templates and all the stuff they can do with it. And I am too. I mean, it's fabulous, but you have to understand how to wield that technology. You can't just build a fantastic looking, you know, HTML email and then send it out to like a cold list. You're just not going to get good, generally speaking, you're not going to get good results off of that. I suppose there's always outliers, right? But when you send an email to us, Chase, you're sending it to a very engaged audience. You're sending it to people who've marked it as safe, you know, who've opened and clicked on those emails time after time. Like our email service providers know exactly how we react to your emails. And so when you send us a big old newsletter and it's got some fancy stuff on it, it's a lot different in terms of the engagement you can expect out of that than it would be if you were sending that same fancy newsletter to a list of, you know, 10,000 cold prospects you scraped off of, you know, D7 or something like that. So there's a lot more to it than that. You know, generally speaking, like 60-40 is kind of the rule, 60% text, 40% HTML. And you kind of have to play with it and run some tests on it to see, you know, if anything's flagging. But if it's less than 60% text, it's, you know, it's potentially going to be an issue. So that's just one tiny little example of some things that we look at over the course of, you know, working with clients, because first we have to deal with the technical stuff, but now we start looking at all of the behavioral stuff that comes after that.
Yeah. And that's the stuff that's just so hard for our support staff. It's like your technical setup is good. That's not the issue. No one wants to hear that, you know? So let me ask you one question.
High level's the problem.
Let me ask you one last question here.
Okay.
Let's say I have Mailgun set up. I'm sending emails. I'm sending cold emails. I'm sending campaign emails. I'm not paying attention to what I'm doing. My rates are going down. I'm in trouble now.
Yeah.
Typically, can you revive that sending subdomain? Are we going to have to change the sending subdomain? Am I going to have to get a whole new domain? Like, what can be done?
Yeah, I really try hard to make sure that the whole new domain part is not where we have to go. Maybe like as a short-term solution, but I have clients right now who their domains are compromised and their domains are their name, like firstname.lastname.com kind of a thing. I mean, that's a sticky situation because that domain is very, very important. And now it's going to take us weeks or maybe months to like bring that back to life, but it can be done. And part of it depends on the root cause of the issue. Like I have a client who she bought a new med spa and took it hook, line, and sinker, took the email account, took the domain, took the website, like took everything, right? And most business owners or business buyers don't look at all that kind of stuff. And gee, I wonder what the domain reputation is, right? The domain reputation was shot. I mean, it took it took like 3 or 4 weeks for us to get all that in check, just so that she could send email with the domain she bought for this new med spa. And the reason that it was shot wasn't because necessarily of the types of email that the previous owner was sending out. When you dig into it, you can kind of figure out what the root cause is. And in this case, it just happened to be she didn't have the authentication set up properly in the DNS. And so we were able to work through that and work with the blacklisting people, you know, to like delist it after we got everything fixed and we could explain it all.
So it is possible to come back from that abyss. Even if you end up on a blacklist, you can get back to the good graces of
That's always the goal. That's always the goal. Yeah, because when you buy a new domain, you have to let it age. It's not like you can just buy a new domain and start sending 1,000 emails on it tomorrow. You have to let it age and warm up, and there's a process to that too. So if it's going to take, 3 or 4 weeks to do that. Why not spend the next 3 or 4 weeks just fixing what was wrong with your current domain? It's gonna be, again, it depends on what the root cause was. In some cases, it is really difficult to recover, and maybe the time and expense that goes into doing that is not worth it. But that's part of what I do. Is just because I see a blacklist doesn't mean it's the black spot like Pirates of the Caribbean, right? It just means we need to dig further. We need to understand, what's blacklisted, what blacklist is it on, what type of blacklist is it on, because some of them are temporary, believe it or not. What kind of deliverability issues is this particular blacklisting causing? Because not all of them cause the same level of deliverability issues. Is it just Yahoo that doesn't like it? In which case, that's probably 8 to 10% of your contacts on average. And so maybe I'm not going to like hyperventilate over that situation. I'm going to take care of it. But if it was Google that didn't like it, now I'm scurrying. I'm like trying to figure that out pretty quickly. So, it's just a matter of understanding how to look at the data, dig in, isolate the root cause, and then know really what the next step should be and what kind of time frame or effort is going to go into actually fixing that problem. And then you can make some educated decisions on how you want to move forward. So
nice. All right, well, we need to wrap up because we've got our town hall coming up. But talk to me about Dadgum. You are now doing this full time. You are helping people. Dadgum it.
It's like a Southern curse word, but it's also kind of exciting. Like my daughter, when she came up with this name, she's like, I don't know if you realize how much you say dadgum. Like, these dadgum emails drive me crazy, right? Or dadgum, I just doubled my open rates. It could be either way, right?
Yeah. So if somebody's hearing this, they want to work with you, they should just reach out through the link that I put in the live, right?
I just gave you my calendar link. I'm not like a Grant Cardone kind of a salesperson. You're not going to hear a bunch of like, I don't even know what to call it, but you're not going to hear me talk like that. I just like to help people. And I'm having so much freaking fun helping people that I just like to get them on the calls. Often, we'll get on a call and I can help you with a couple of things pretty quickly. I can answer whatever questions you have. So I think if somebody is interested in talking with me about this, just reach out, like just get on my calendar and we'll spend a half an hour, 40 minutes, something like that, just looking at your setup, and you can ask me whatever questions you want. Do I have programs, after that? Yeah, I have a program, obviously, because this is how I help people the best, right? But is that program right for you? I don't know. You don't know. Let's take a look at the setup and see what the issues are, and then we'll kind of go from there. And if that's something you're interested in, we can talk about it. I have a program that I've opened up to just 10 people right now. So, and actually have 5 people that have just gotten in it. So I have 5 spots left. If somebody is really serious about email deliverability and you want to go like, I don't want to do this half-hour call thing, I just want to get in and get stuff done, then, just reach out through Messenger and let me know, and we can talk about that too.
Awesome. Well, thanks so much for coming back on, Krystin. We really appreciate it.
Thank you for having me. This is so much fun. And thank you so much for you guys, all of you at HighLevel, the work that you're doing, the fact that we can bend your ear on this call we're going into next, this HL team call, like the fact that we actually can talk to the owners of the company, the developers, the people who are doing the training like yourself. That's unbelievable. Name a company like ActiveCampaign. Do you do that with ActiveCampaign? No. Okay, that's not happening. So I am really excited about this. I have I have like 120 clients in HighLevel that are all in a group with me, and we can bend the ear of people like you to say, hey, this is what we really need or want, and this is why. And when we have a much larger voice like that, we can do so much more. So I'm excited about the stats that are coming with the new workflow builder. I am so excited about it. I did 3 lives on it in different groups and on my profile this morning because I'm like freaking ecstatic. If I can do stuff for people with half those stats, and now you're going to give me more, I'm beyond thrilled. So thank you for all the work that you're doing. And I'm thrilled to be working with you on the help docs too. I think that's going to be a lot of fun.
Cool. Well, I'll be sure to pass the kudos on to the team that makes it happen.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thanks for watching, everybody. We will see you in the next one.
All right. Bye.